community. Troy Snyder here. Hope you're doing well. Thanks again for joining me today. Hope that I can dispense some good information and helpful to you, whether you're treating or helping people with this, or sexual struggle or betrayal trauma, or you're in that process yourself. I'm trying to create information that can be used for both, and maybe even create some dialogue between you and your helper as you go through this process. Well, one thing I've been doing is I just finished up our first level of training with our CSASI program, and in that mod, we teach about the overview of addiction, sex addiction. We kind of do that first, and one of the things that comes up when we do kind of an overview is we need to include kind of a treatment overview. And I thought it was really helpful for me maybe to come in and just kind of give a quick flyover of things to consider when treating it. This is not an exhaustive, how to treat, but it's more of a really kind of some points and some things to consider. So whether you're in recovery and betrayal trauma yourself, and this may be helpful for you to think through and see if there's places that are maybe missing, or this may be for someone who's working with this and say, oh, I can do that, or that'll be helpful, and start kind of giving you some more clarity to that. So as I was sitting down with this class, I just kind of put these several words down. I'm just going to read them and kind of give some thoughts around them. So I'll say this as the onset: everything is spiritual. We come from a faith perspective, so everything we do is from a Christian perspective. But in starting treatment, and these are not linear, but they're, just think about them as significant parts that have to be in there, some maybe before the others. So I put behavioral, spiritual, emotional, mental, neurobiological, and social. Right. So let me read this again: behavioral, spiritual, emotional, mental, bioneurological, and social. These are some key points that we need to consider. So let's just take a look at them just kind of as a quick overview. Behavioral. So when you're in, and this is going to be more primarily the addict, when you're coming in for addiction, we're not into just everything has to be behavioral modification, because that's not really the problem. But it is something that has to be addressed. So for instance, if I'm struggling with pornography on my phone, then I'm going to have to do some behavioral things to stop feeding the addiction and the problem and the cycle that goes on with that. So it's not uncommon to have some very clear behavioral boundaries that you would have, whether that's locking down the device, not having the device, having software such as Covenant Eyes on your device. Then you do that. You take some behavioral practices, or if you have lots of temptations when you're alone in your room, then we have to do some behavioral changes. Maybe you stay in a different room, or maybe you're never in that room alone, or you leave the door open. There's just some behavioral things that you can do. This doesn't fix the issue, but it's important, because I've seen guys who get really discouraged because they come in and they say, I know it's wrong, and I'm starting to look at the mental and maybe the spiritual, but I don't make any behavioral changes. And that can be problematic. So just something to consider when you're doing treatment. And I say spiritual, everything is spiritual, but I find that in treatment that a guy has to be working at his spiritual life. So they need to be, in the simplest terms, they need to be praying and talking to the Lord about their struggles and their pains, and even just asking him to help me keep these boundaries. I need to be reading and studying his word and his ways, not just about sexuality, but about everything, and see his grace, and see his love, and see his compassion, and care for you. And then I need to be speaking spiritual things one to another. I need that community around me. And that may be in your group, or that may be in your church. There's a variety of different places, but you have to be activating and practicing your spiritual life. And there's a ton of other spiritual disciplines, fasting and silence and solitude and journaling, and there's a lot of them. But you need to practice your spiritual exercises, because that's going to be the help for you in this situation. And then we get into, and again, not linear, but just things we consider emotional. I say emotional before mental because I find that most of my guys have emotions, all of them do, but don't really understand what they are. And if you don't understand what they are or can label them, then you can't figure out where they're coming from. So we begin to start to help them understand the feelings they have using the feelings wheel, the feelings faces, the feeling definitions, and start talking through some of their story and start to see some of the connections to feelings, whether it's from your family of origin stuff or from current situation. And they begin to identify the feelings that they have, which is great because then once they begin to identify the feelings, we ask the question, what are the feelings telling us? Where are the feelings coming from, right? And this is then gets us into our the mental approach, our belief system, our values, and things like that. So, for instance, if a guy says that, I'm really overwhelmed at work and I'm really scared in this situation with my boss, then we can go, okay, well, you've identified what you feel and you've identified some of the things that may be contributing to it. Why is that fearful? Why is that overwhelming or scary to you, right? Well, because I have a belief that I'm going to get in trouble. Well, where did you get the belief that you're going to get in trouble? Was there some indication that your boss told you were going to get in trouble? Or is that something that has come from your past that is playing into it when authority wants to talk to you, right? Now, you could be getting in trouble because you might have done something wrong. But what happens is that when I perceive that, I have that belief system and I perceive that and I start to feel these things, I then maybe move to try to avoid and do things inappropriate to escape that pain and that possibility. I know that's just an illustration, but once you identify the feelings, then you can mine down and look at the mental beliefs and the situations and the core beliefs that they have. Because when you can identify those core beliefs, then you can really begin to do some change. You can't change what happened to you, but you can change that belief. And so if I walk around and think that I'm no good, we know where that's going to lead when challenging things come. So you got to work on changing that belief to what ultimately what God says about you. And this is why the spiritual part is so important. There's some exercises, not exercises, but there's some real spiritual practices that you can do as the I am statements. Who am I in Christ? What's my true identity? This is the identity I was raised with, but this is my true identity. And we start to reform that or renew that or transform. Remember what the scripture says, the renewing of the mind, right? This is what this is talking about, our belief systems. And we need to get down to that level of belief system so that we can change that. So in the treatment, we've done some behavioral things, we're doing spiritual things, we're identifying emotions, and those are just the gateway to help us understand what's going on in our hearts, our minds. And then we have two other things, and I already kind of alluded to one, but we have the biology and the neurology. We've got to help educate our clients on how this drug of porn or sex and the unhealthy use of it is a drug and affects your body and your neurological system. And so when you educate on this, it starts to give them some understanding and help them not think that they're crazy, and also gives them the understanding that it's going to take some time to kind of recalibrate that biological neurological system, because your body is submissive to you, and if you give it something and it likes it, it's going to want more and more and more and more. And then when you decide to stop, your body doesn't just automatically stop. It's what they call withdrawals, and it doesn't withdraw easily. There's a fight for, I want this, I want this. It's like a toddler sometimes with a cookie. I want it, and so it'll fight until it is put into submission through a variety of other things we've already started to talk about. But moves you down, and you reset your neurobiology and you reset your body. And this is just very powerful when you can really start to understand you have a lot of control with God's help over your body. And then the other thing in treatment is social. And I kind of mentioned this up there in the spiritual, but I need a community. I can't do this alone. I need people that I can bounce things off of. I need others that I can share this stuff with and get it out of my head and my heart and work through this. I need this community when it's good and when it gets tough. And so when you're thinking about, overall treatment for uh, porn or sex addiction, these are some basic things that one ought to consider. Now, some of these are very applicable to the betrayed spouse, but there's another section we're doing on that, and I'll talk a little bit about that maybe another time. But I just think it's very important that when you, as a helper, sit with somebody, you have a big picture plan of where you're going. Because if you don't, then you'll just lean into your default and what you think is the most primary. And I've seen people overshoot on behavioral modification. I've seen people overshoot on spiritualization. I've seen people overshoot on just the biological stuff. And we have to put them all together. And if you're in treatment yourself, as you're looking through this, you're like, well, maybe this is a piece that may be missing. I need to get some education and information on this. So I hope this treatment overview summary gives you a little bit of encouragement and some thoughts. Have a great day.